Okay, everyone, welcome to our afternoon session of our special meeting. We will continue our regular agenda with item number 3. And looks like our CAO will present this one. Thank
Right,
you.
yeah, it'll be real quick. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this particular item was kind of a carryover from item number 2 on our regular agenda. What we wanted to do is kind of piggyback the 2 and share with your board the actual cost that would be associated with revamping our infrastructure, particularly roads. So I've asked Joe Hordle to come to your board today to discuss what those costs would be and kind of give us an idea, the nexus of if we decided to go with a measure in 2016, what that would be. So, Joe?
Yeah, thank you. So this is a little bit of a carryover also of a study session we did about a month and a half ago on road conditions, and where we talked about the different types of maintenance choices the county has for our roads. Included in your packet are maps where we took the information we shared, which says there's major things for road maintenance of overlaying roads, which is what people normally think of. We go out and repave the road, put a couple inches of asphalt down, makes it nice and smooth. We also, in the past, have done chip seal, where it's the gravel on oil, which also extends the life of the road, not as much as an overlay. But one of the questions the board had asked about was, so where would we go and actually do those types of treatments, and what would be the order of magnitude cost to do it? And so Armand went and looked at where the highest volume roads were to get the everyday commute traffic, as well as serving our businesses here in the county. And so the 2 maps that are included in your packet show where those roadway segments are. And then we did an exercise of doing some first pass of cost to looking at each one of those road segments. And that's what's the attachment, the charts. And so one looks at an overlay, one looks at chip seal. As you can see on the map, color it's not quite popping there, but when you go through and look at roadways like Fairview, Shore Road, Cienega Road, Union Road, those are roads that are getting a tremendous amount of traffic on them, and in some of them, especially like Cienega, are in pretty bad shape. And so as you go through and look at the cost to do these types of roadways, so for example, in the chart we passed out for the matrix, you can see right on the top here, Fairview Road. It's about 10 miles of length. For us to go through and put the chip seal, just to go through and chip seal it with not doing much in the way of repairs, is about $600,000 to go do it. Last time when we talked with you, we put some other numbers to it that talked about if we do a grind out where we actually fix some of the deficiencies in that roadway, it actually starts running about $75,000 a mile. So that number from 600 goes up probably about $800,000, starts getting at magnitude. And I would say it's definitely going to be that kind of number. So that starts to give you a bit of a sense, as you heard from the financial consultant, that if we were able to generate through bonding, $10 million, $20 million, $30 million of how far those dollars will go. Obviously, we're not going to go through and solve all of our problems with just a sales tax, especially one that would be like 10 years. It's really going to need to be a combination of tools that we would use. Sales tax is part of it. We do get gas tax dollars that come from the state back to us. That is some source, but that is the dollars today that we use to pay for our road crew. So the approximately 10, 11 staff that we have in our roads crew is about $1.6 million to go to staff them and put them on the road. Our total budget for the roads department is about $2.6 million, including asphalt and rock and fuel that we purchase every year. It is our starting point is that 2.6. That's just basically the level of service that we're able to accomplish today. We're not doing any surfacing or chip sealing. The one other thing I think is important to recognize, that budget, the $2.6 million that we get today, it's a combination of dollars, but one of the big sources of that is this gas tax that comes through from the state. That changes every year, and that's one of the things that impacted when the state did all of their kind of moving the dollars between different funding sources, the triple flip. One of those dealt with gas tax, and because gas tax, some of it is per gallon and some of it is sales tax based, there's a true-up that happens every year at the state level to keep the dollar amount equal, recognizing that when you have a per gallon tax and a sales tax, those are moving differently as the price of gasoline moves up and down and the number of gallons, it seems to be on a decline. And so what we're now hearing from the state is next year we'll actually lose potentially about $600,000 out of our road fund. So that 2.6 next year, our starting point may actually be about 2 million, just because of the true-up that's going on at the state level is such a wide swing that they kind of missed the mark of how to true it up this current year. So they're correcting it next year. We'll know more here in the next month or so as they kind of keep working through that, but that is one of the things that we're trying to keep our eye onto that piece of the puzzle. So clearly we've got challenges in front of us, and I think as we go through and look at the overlay piece of it, and so let me explain a little bit because it is hard to see on the chart.
Chair, before he goes off onto the next point.
Okay.
On the 2.6, what percentage is that that goes into chip sealing areas? Because I know the road crew is just about 100% of the
Right.
time with pothole maintenance and things like that, but is it all potholes, or is there some roads being chip sealed in the county?
We're doing zero preventative maintenance, if you will. We're just doing pure patching it right now. So there is not a overlay program or chip seal. We are looking at this fiscal year because we may actually have some dollars left over and looking at to see what we could do to try to do some preventative maintenance at the end of the fiscal year. So we're working that out right now to see, if there's like $50,000 or $100,000, what could we do with that would maybe get Union Road fixed or work on Fairview, trying to find some spots where to get ready for chip seal or paving in the future, we could do some stuff sooner and that would stop some of the decline. But right now, we don't have any of that programmed in.
Okay, I was just kind of curious if there was any. Thanks.
So as a part of those costs, you can go through and see that like Cienega Road, just to go through and chip seal that because it's 18 miles, is about $1.3 million. And as I noted, there are some parts of our roadway network that are really in bad shape that we are starting to assess now. Are there even some capital rebuilds that we should be thinking about? Cienega is one of those that as you start climbing up from this side of Cienega up towards the RV park or the off-road park, that because of landslides and some failing bridges up in there that don't qualify for state, that we're going to need to figure out some sort of strategy around that. So sales tax is one way to do that. It's not stuff that today's counted for in our impact fee, so it's some of the things that I think are other sources of funds that other communities use as they go through and look at surcharges on building permits or things like that as a way to try and close that gap. Let me get to bring up that. Oops, I guess that one's not in there. I was thinking I had the chart in there.
It should be next.
Oh, it's up. Sorry. There we go. So last meeting, we talked about that there's about 400 miles of roads in the county. So the analysis we gave you only looks at about 180 of those. So these are the main miles in the county jurisdiction that we really do think we need to make a major investment to keep up on these. It does recognize that we have other roads that are going to stay essentially in status quo, that we can just keep patching on those, and they're going to kind of be a slow decline. But they're kind of the far ends of the county, essentially the cul-de-sacs off of the major roads that are light traffic. So we think that that's an appropriate strategy to take with this. But when you go through and look at page page 9 in the packet, we do the summaries of those different options, that if we went and did the chip seal, we're looking at about a $12 million project. If we went through and did a 2-inch overlay, it's about $31 million. I think it's a little bit light on the grind out of patching sort of stuff, so there's some other money that would fit into that. But that's what it would take to get those caught back up. It is one that you don't have to do all that in 1 year. Definitely, it's something you can work over. You know, it's a 5-year or 10-year plan to work through these. So it does make it a little bit easier to work your way through it. The other piece we did include in here was looking at the order of magnitude of Highway 25 to get from San Felipe over to 156. The $58 million is just looking at kind of an order of magnitude to build the 4-lane roadway through that area. Doesn't include the interchange, which we think is, you know, another 30 to 50, depending on how complicated that gets. But, you know, those are some major investments that sit out there. And one of the things that, you know, the board has heard, you heard some of it this morning from one of the speakers, you know, where we go through and prioritize, and as we go through and talk, you know, especially something like a sales tax or if it was parcel where you got to go to the voters, is where is the best bang for that dollar go? And it's one of the things I would ask the board to really consider is how fast you go through and take on some things like 25 versus getting some of the base things that every citizen really in the county is using versus something that's getting used for a couple hours a day for a smaller group. And that is one of the things that is a real challenge, because that is a major project that we're really expected by Caltrans to self-fund, and that puts a major burden on our community to do that. And there's only, at the end of the day, so much that we're going to be able to carry. So I think that's really one of our toughest challenges is, you know, where those dollars are going to get the best return out, both to either get approval for it, but in the end, actually have a system that works, you know, 24/7. So with that, I really wanted to kind of just connect the dots from the last time and really leave time for the board to have the conversation and help with that conversation.
Joe, the 58 million is only from San Felipe to the 156 bypass? Sorry.
Yeah, it's going from San Felipe to 156. I think that's the magnitude of that versus the $200 million project to get all the way out to the county line.
Okay, and how much are we talking about in the way of, I mean, that's only like, what, a mile? Maybe?
It's a couple of miles.
A couple
But I
miles,
think-
is it? 2
yeah.
miles?
And that's the problem. That project has to go by the wayside. It's too much money for such a short distance, but Caltrans doesn't want the accesses of those businesses. There's quite a few access points between that San Felipe to 156.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they want that road to swing out into the field on the other side of the shooting range hill.
Yes.
And come back around and tie in closer to Hudner Lane. And it just is undoable. And somehow we just got to try to convince Caltrans that we need to put lanes side by side. Either that or let people kind of suffer through that stretch of road and do the, emphasize the from 156 to the county line.
Or do the interchange, and that's one of the things that COG is looking at, bringing an engineer on board to assist them, and really looking at options to do that best value engineering kind of decision-making, because you can spend a lot of money and not actually make the traffic move any better, and that's the concern, the way Caltrans is looking at it right now.
And I thought they already had chosen alternates that have been kind of looked at by the community and had picked a alternate A and B or 1 and 2 that were the ones. There was a time when there were like 4 possibilities, and it was scaled down to 2. So, so are we stuck with those alternates, Joe?
No, that's the work that Mary and her group and bringing the engineer on board is really to, well, Caltrans is off looking through environmental process, kind of their preferred project.
Right.
Is to come back with other alternatives to that would be much more affordable and meet most of the objectives. And really focusing on making the traffic move better without trying to design kind of the best ultimate design type freeway, you know. And that's the challenge, is we're building something that, you know, it works twice a day in one direction. You know, and so that the capacity and how that really needs to be optimized for what our needs in this community are is not fitting in a normal Caltrans standard where they're thinking, you know, traffic that's moving both directions, in a more urbanized area. So it's getting it more custom fit to our community. And so that's the work we want to bring an engineering firm on board through COG to explore some options and help us negotiate better with Caltrans.
Okay. Good. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Joe, I got two questions and then a follow-up question. So, see, on 25, what you're saying is maybe built 1 or 2 additional lanes between San Felipe 156, that if the traffic's going in the morning that way, that middle lane is going to be going that way, and then on the way back will be going back down, the opposite. Is that those
Well,
kind
that's
of?
one idea that has been talked about. It's called a zipper lanes, what they just did on the Golden Gate Bridge, where there's movable barriers. It's challenging where you've got center traffic that's moving through there. It makes it almost impossible to do that. And so that's one of the things we want to see. Are there options that really make sense? Do we get better value for putting an extra lane in each direction, but not trying to take away access to those roads, treating it more like a boulevard rather than trying to design it as an expressway?
In Seattle, they have that.
They have reversible lanes,
Yeah.
where the arrows change back and forth.
Yep, yep. And then, Madam Chair, Joe, if we're going to build the list now, today, let me add my roads from my district, because, I mean, Supervisor Rivas has, what, none? I have maybe 2 or 3, and I do see Buena Vista here, but I don't see Wright Road on here, and I know that traffic is used a lot. I know that
Right,
for a fact.
to get over to 156 and
Yeah, they go
cut through.
from Dazzle's gas station going to San Juan, or, vice versa. So I'm surprised I don't see Wright Road on this list.
So we were looking at where we've had counts and where we saw the higher volumes on it. It definitely is a cut-through road. And I think as the city of Hollister grows northward and starts looking at the stuff around the bypass area and San Felipe, which they've been talking, that there's development that might want to go that way, I think it will put more pressure on that part of the network. Right now, we didn't see it enough to put it on the list, but one of the things we talked last meeting about was a pavement management system, and that is part of why that investment makes sense, is it is looking at that changing volumes that are moving on the network, what's going on with accident data, and the actual size of the road itself, and that actually might resort some of these. So we're not necessarily saying, hey, this is the list to go adopt. This was just a sample of what certain roadways around the county that are higher volume would take to bring them up.
Okay, and then my final question, Madam Chair, and I think this is more for Joe Paul. And I know it's premature, I know it's the early stage of the discussion. If the sales tax goes forward and it's for transportation, I'm willing to bet that those sales tax dollars is not even going to be enough to meet half of this list, right, Joe?
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. It won't be enough.
Because I want to make sure that those gasoline dollars, they still come back to our community, and then any development gets approved, those dollars will go to, to mitigate the impacts that these new developments will have on these roads.
Okay. Supervisor
Well,
Menzer?
I think,
Well, and that's why I mentioned the traffic impact fee. We have that county-wide traffic impact fee that's dealing with regional network, so that, the Highway 25 and, Union widenings and things like that. But there are pressures that are put onto the existing network by every time something new comes on. As we go through and build another house, we expand businesses, that sort of stuff. It puts incremental pressure on the network. And right now, there really isn't a funding source that deals with that. So that's why I just kind of put that out there as a seed to think about as the county's working on traffic or impact fees, looking at development. That's one of the ones that my old life actually was how they paid for a lot of resurfacing, as well as things for ped and bike improvements, traffic calming in the neighborhoods. That was coming out of basically a tax that was tied to the building permit valuations, and it allowed it to go and kind of keep pace with as development happened, and it tracked with each district. It actually allocated back to where the development was going on to deal with those impacts.
Any other questions of Joe? Comments? Okay, I'll open it up to the public to come up and comment on this item.
Marty Richmond.
Oh.
Thank you, Marty Richmond from Hollister again. And just to mention, as I mentioned earlier today, that 1%, well, I'll call it the catch-up tax, part of that could be used for roadways too. There's no rule, because that's, if you do that as a general tax, that 1%, you could use part of that for the roadways. I want to concentrate on the Highway 25 issue, and I've passed out a fact sheet, and I've given a copy to the clerk of the board, and it has some interesting facts on it about how we're not getting our much for our transportation dollar out of the state of California. And I would like to see Highway 25 improved, and but I'll be the first one to agree that the Caltrans plan doesn't make any sense at all. It's way too expensive. Even their cheap plan, Alternative B, was going to be $92 million. That's for 11 miles. That was going to be basically by the time you're done, and that was 5 years ago or 6 years ago, that was priced out. So basically, you're talking about $10 million a mile. But why do I say we're not getting our money's worth? Well, we don't rank very high, and we don't have a lot of roads in California. We only rank number 11 in state-controlled mileage, and when you put the lane mileage on there, we have wide lanes. We have ours average over 3 lanes a highway, which is much higher than most of the nation. But even when you put it on there, we only rank 9th. And when it comes to per capita, because we're the most populous state, and oh, by the way, we got about 238 million registered vehicles, which is some kind of outrageous, no, I mean 28 million registered vehicles. We have almost as many as we have people. We have 620,000 publicly owned vehicles registered in the state of California. That's phenomenal. But we only have 0.001 lane miles per capita, and that's one of the lowest in the entire nation. It rates number 48. And we've spent the most in 2012, $9.1 billion on our roads, but we didn't get much for it. And why didn't we? Well, one of the reasons is that we pay the most for a mile's worth of highway. By far, we have enormous charges, $48,000 a mile just for overhead. Has nothing to do with the projects at all. $48,000 a mile for the roads just for overhead. And another shocking, and this is really a shocking number, in 2012 they spent $9.1 million on the state-controlled highways, like 25, for maintenance and new capital and all that. They have a reserve of, at that time, of $24.4 billion, according to the Federal Highway Administration. This dwarfs all the reserves in the entire United States. Thank you very much.
And Marty, I got clarification from Joe that 58 million is really for only 2 miles, so that would put it at almost, at over $29 million per mile. Okay.
That's for the 2-mile project, not the 11-mile project.
Okay, there are no other speakers. I'll bring it back to the board. Thank you, Marty. Any other comments, any other questions? Okay.
Well, I just want to make a comment. I really appreciate, Joe, you coming back with this information. I found the report to be very informative. I think we still have some work to do as far as prioritizing some key areas as we try to move forward and convince the public that we do have a real problem with just our basic road maintenance program. And then if we want to move forward in the future, as this county is growing, in 25, you know, I don't think it's that big of a deal right now traveling it. I know I'll have arguments from some of my constituents that do that commute in the morning. They want to drive 75 miles an hour. They probably get it going 55. But we have to plan on the expansion of that highway and start, you know, shooting for it and accomplishing, you know, a phased project one way or the other. And so it's not going to happen by itself. It's have to happen with the leadership of this board and partners with City of Hollister.
Yeah, I agree with you. But Joe, thank you so much. And I want to thank staff. This is really important information as we move forward to talking about the sales tax. If that's the direction we're going to go, this information is going to serve us very well. because then we can see, okay, this is what we need, how much can we generate with a 0.5% or a 3/4 or 1%, whatever that may be. I can tell you that a 0.5% would cover maybe a quarter of that need. And so we do have to plan ahead, and those numbers are critical for that, so
Well, that
thank
was
you.
the work of Sarah, Armand, and Renee to get the maps and that in the report that you had in the packet today, so
Okay.
it's helping with that. 2 points I think are actually relevant to this, and then I'll sit down. One is that twice now today I've heard a radio ad with Will Durst talking about road conditions and the needs to go through and fund it. So there's a consortium that's funding radio ads in the Bay Area, and I think they're probably running them throughout California, raising awareness that the gas tax is not really paying for what we need to maintain our road network. So I think there are some things to leverage where the county's going. That's going to be some awareness going on at a statewide level that may be helpful. And then the second, if you didn't see it, there was an article in the Mercury News yesterday and pointing out the tremendous increase in traffic in the Bay Area and how much of that was coming from southern Santa Clara County, San Benito, and Monterey County into Silicon Valley, and how it was really changing the assumptions that were going on in their traffic modeling. So that may help with some of the funding that Santa Clara has been talking about in the past with 156 or 152, and getting some decisions there, which will ultimately help us on 25.
It will, yeah. Joe, thank you again, and thank the staff for us. Sarah, thank you for all this information. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4. Turn this over to our CAO Espinosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so with the increase in growth in our county on the horizon, we were talking about growth right now. Been talking about roads and our infrastructure. One of the things that is coming down the pipe is development. We have some very large developments that are coming in. And with that being said, we had discussed at our board retreat about the possibility of reorganizing public works planning and integrated waste. So today we have our HR interim director, Georgia Cochran, here. We also have Joe Hordell here to discuss with you the possibility of moving forward with an RMA similar to Monterey County and other jurisdictions that actually have a joint operation between planning, public works, and other offices in different jurisdictions. So I'd like to invite Georgia up to Georgia or Sarah.
Or both.
Or
We'll
both.
come up here together. So just for the record, on the agenda, it reads that you're approving a reorganization today, which is not correct. Georgia's, it's actually more correct in the staff report. Just ignore the word reorganization and approving that. It is not part of it, and it is incorrect in the subject line of the AIT, so I apologize for that.
That's okay, thank you.
So part of this, and Sarah's correct and Ray is correct, this has been a joint effort. Part of it started with the Optimity study. It continued into your board report, something especially that is becoming more common in smaller jurisdictions where you have to look for ways to try to use your available resources as opposed to creating more department heads with smaller departments. It becomes a little bit difficult to get any economy of scale. So this concept is the service level concept in terms of looking at that and how do we make that combination. So, and I can direct questions related to that to Joe or to Sarah, but the thing that we really need today is to approve the class spec for this resource management agency director for a couple of reasons. We can get moving. We have a timeline here where we have Joe's expertise with a somewhat finite end date, and we want to be able to get that structure started. While we haven't come to you for the reorganization, we want to at least begin recruiting, get the position approved for the director. We would not hire anyone until your board has actually approved the reorganization. But if we wait until that point while they're getting the rest of the information together and then start, we're going to run out of time. And so that's why we have a little bit of the cart before the horse here. So this is a concept. This particular resource management agency is not something we made up in San Benito. Monterey County has been doing this for I'm not sure how many years, but I know that probably 10 years ago, Solano County went to the same kind of structure for the simple reason that the county could not support a public works department, a planning department. In this case, I think they had environmental management and a couple of other functions in that particular department, as well as solid waste. So they did a combination, and it was called resource management. Imagine that. And so that's kind of becoming a title. I believe Kings County may have recently done the same thing, but I'm not sure if I have the county right. But this is in smaller counties, we're starting to see that. Some of them have had it in place for a while. But that's what is before you today, is to approve the spec, and also then we, as the same time, we need to adopt a resolution such that that becomes a piece in the ordinance of creating this as a department head position, and then ask staff to come back with the details on this reorganization.
And Georgia, if I may ask, Joe then would have the charge of, during this time, serve in that position as an interim. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's a piece of this as well.
Okay, and then he would come back, and I don't know how much more time Joe's going to be with us, but I'm hoping that at the end of the day, he'll be able to give us a recommendation and say, you know what, this may work, this may not work, or this does work for these reasons or not. Is that basically what we are hoping to happen?
I think in fairness, yes, it is. He's working out the pieces. The concept is there, and we believe the structure works, but I think he's putting together the pieces of how, the specifics of how that department would be organized, because you gain in your administrative support, you gain some economies of scale. You no longer have a silo of clerical support or admin support over here and one over here. You can group that together, so there's a lot of other pieces to fit together, and that's what Joe and the CAO's office are working on, so that they can come back and give you those specifics before you formally adopt the department, combining the departments. We have some meet and confer obligations with the union as well before we move forward, but at this point, we need to be able to, number one, put Joe in charge so that he can oversee, he can get in and observe and oversee a lot of these functions to be able to make those recommendations to you.
Okay, and I know we're not Solano County, but they've already done it, and do we know, has somebody contacted them to see what are the challenges and how it's working for them, and how long have they been doing this?
About 12 years that I'm aware of. I think it may have been a little bit longer, but I actually worked in that organization for almost 7 years, and I didn't see challenges. Again, you still have to have an engineer in a component, but it saves, what you get is someone with those leadership skills who has the bigger picture. In this case, whether that be, and this spec is written such that it could be an engineer, it could be someone, say, who was a community development, planning and community development, or someone who has a good grasp of subject matter and administrative and operations understanding, because you're not going to expect that person to calculate the thickness of a roadway. But they certainly need to make sure that all the pieces fit together and move together. So this is written a little bit broadly. Then that's what Joe is putting together, is those key components of what does the rest of that structure look like, so that you can see that before you formally adopt anything. But I've seen it work. Monterey County, I talked to them just briefly. Ray may have more information, but I don't know that they have significant challenges in any way, shape, or form either. Those are the two that we know of and have talked to. There are others.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may. So, yeah, first of all, we've been in communication with our planning department as well with this process. Byron has been an integral part. He's working on giving input as well from the planning side. Second of all, I've actually met with the County of Monterey concerning this, sat down with the CAO, Lou, and we've talked about this. Their experience is, in the very beginning, obviously, there was growing pains. There was a learning curve. There was some, issues that they were confronted with. But they were able to resolve those issues and then move forward. And I basically had asked him, well, would you go back to the way you were before? He says, no, that's working the way we envisioned it, and it is definitely more productive and more efficient. And that was really the key. The issue was the public were having problems because in one department it was a priority to do something, but maybe in another department it wasn't. So there was no oversight over both, where they can move those projects quicker through the pipeline. And that was his input is they were able to kind of remedy that or fix those issues by having somebody that oversaw both organizations, and they were able to kind of prioritize and get projects done or have them move forward quicker. So.
Well, I think that there's no better time to really look at this, because we have interims in each one of those that are mentioned here, the integrated waste, public works, and the planning, building and planning. So this is, if we were going to do it and study it and take a chance at it, I think there's no more opportune time than now. Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, I kind of laid awake last night thinking about this, and it's such a big undertaking. Though I could see the integrated waste. It's a very, very small department, kind of a one-person show-up, so to speak. But taking into account our lack of staffing and mid-management people, structure, having enough people working in the organization, I'm kind of concerned about that we're putting too much of a burden on one person. I go into planning quite often with individual issues and problems in my district, and I go right to Byron. If I have a problem with roads, I go right to Joe. Now, am I going to if I have a problem in my district, am I going to one guy in planning and get this, I don't know. I know it does work in some areas, but
Yeah.
I just would feel like our organization is lacking the under support to do this. I don't know.
Absolutely, and one of the things, unfortunately, I think the media captured this item a little bit wrong when they wrote about it last week. This is not about cost savings. If you said, are we doing this? Absolutely not. These functions are under-resourced as it is. I think the challenge is getting the right positions, the right people in the right places to deliver the service, and to not have either overlaps or even worse, gaps between the service delivery that we do to our customers. And so how we're looking at this is actually creating service areas around, like development services, and going through in our facilities and recognizing there's a lot of pieces that fit to that today are scattered across the organization, and actually get them so that they're much more aligned in delivering that service. We're a county, but we have urban functions about us, and it's really recognizing that there almost needs to be a community focus of services, of how we do code enforcement and other support out to the neighborhoods. And it's how to pull those pieces together. It's not to go through and spread us thinner. It's actually to look at the dollars we have, how do we put them, do we actually get the best return on those dollars?
Yeah, and I guess if maintaining the floor, if you got to find the right person. I think we've had problems with Public Works prior to you getting down there that you're still struggling to straighten out. If the person is the wrong person running are we a mess up all 3 or 4 departments? And I've seen some real bad hires in my time on this board, some really good hires, but boy, we're having a tough time getting an assistant CAO. How we attract somebody that has the knowledge of planning and be able to kind of maneuver through that and Public Works and help us with our road list.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's, in my prior life, I had planning, building, and code enforcement, but also virtually ran fire and Public Works is related to development. So, it's like a 500-person organization, but it really, as you say, you need to have the right people in the right spots. So mid-level managers are really important. And clearly, when you go through and build an organization like this, it's important for things to get lost. And it's one of the things that Ray and I are talking about is, even the long-range planning vision for the county can't get lost in this to where, the planning official or the planning director or whatever you want to call it has got to have a strong voice and support, both through the administration, to be able to go and have the tough conversations from time to time. It's how do we actually make that happen and not have it to be, a senior planner down in the organization, or whatever. You've got to have somebody that have a major management experience, capacity professionally to articulate that through this entire organization. So even if you hired somebody with a business background, which San Jose did for a while to run development services, was a really good pick for that, but depended on professional people, professional building person, a professional planner, to make sure that there was that competence and that voice in the organization. So that's part of what we're talking about now, is how to do that, but also make sure there's good management and leadership for the entire organization and moving forward.
Well, it sounds like you can envision that you envision that it can work, because you've been there
Absolutely.
before, and you're up for the challenge, so you've got the experience and.
Now, I want to make this work on a sustainable basis for this organization. It is really, I think, important for the future of the county to deal with development, but also to make sure the facilities get built and that there's that, real strong view of how we go and, get ourselves 20 years from now where we need to be.
Yeah. Any Supervisor Delacruz?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I was thinking about this too, and I too had concerns about some of the questions Supervisor Botello have, but listening to you and then listening to you, Supervisor, Madam Chair, I will support your position. I think it's time we take a jump, we take a little faith of jump and see where it leads us, and I'm uncomfortable moving in this direction, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I think I have mixed feelings. I think that this, if it's done correctly, it could lead to a lot of efficiencies, especially for a small county such as ourselves. I do recall my time working for the County of Monterey, their RMA agency, although they still had a department head for planning and for public works. There, it's called the Resource Management Agency. And so I just have to, do some more research myself and kind of wrap my head around this concept and how it's going to work here. But I think that, the potential for this to work certainly is there. But I'm just not ready to make that commitment just now, now. But I think I'm with Supervisor Botello. I'm cautiously optimistic. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
CAO?
Yeah, and I was just going to add one more comment, and it's really kind of more of a layman or more of just a basic even job. One would be the secretary. There's a redundancy within these offices to address the public. By combining these offices, we can have one secretary receiving questions or receiving people and then deferring them to the particular office or scheduling or other things like that. So that's just one example. I mean, there's quite a few others, and Joe and I have been talking about them, and he kind of expressed that a little bit more on the technical side. But I think that there are a lot of benefits. Again, Monterey County, they went through this process. It wasn't easy. I mean, I don't want to make sure the board was well aware of it. This was it was a hurdle that they had to get through, and there were some growing pains. But, in hindsight, my question to Lou was, is this something you would do again? And he goes, most definitely. It was worth it for the organization. I think we're still at that point where we need to do more homework, more research. I know Joe has been working on this as well as Byron and staff. We've been looking at it and analyzing it. Our financial person, Melinda, has also been looking at the numbers as well. So we've done a lot of work on this, but I think that there's still more to do, and we definitely need to come back to the board with a strong plan. But at this moment, I think this is the right thing to do.
Okay. So then, Georgia, today we would be approving the position and putting, moving forward with a temporary test, so to speak, of is this the way we really want to be permanently? And that will come from Joe, a recommendation from him and others, of course, our CAO. And if it's working, then at a later date, we will make a decision to make this a permanent move.
Correct. Let me get the horses in the right order here. So, for example, even the staff recommendation is 1, 2, 3, 4, but number 3 is to authorize Joe to oversee those operations so he can bring this, he can flesh it out and bring this back to you. Now, that's key. Number 1 and 2 are really adopt the spec. That would allow us to go out and begin the recruitment. And the only reason we do that is so that we don't wait 3 more months, have you adopt that, and then start, and then we have a hole when Joe exits the organization before we have someone on board. And I do need to emphasize, in terms of the county, there would be no job offer made until your board had
Decides.
approved this reorganization. If there is no resource management agency, there is no one to hire to head up a non-existent agency. And I believe, if I'm not correct, if it hasn't been beat into me enough, the way we would hire that person, that's the piece of the resolution, because our ordinance says that you make the appointment at the recommendation of the CAO. So staff does not have the ability to even make that appointment.
Georgia, thank you. I will open it up to the public at this time.
Is this the last item on the agenda?
No, there's
We'll get
one
one
more.
more.
I have something to say about everything, so I'll have something to say about this. Marty Richard from Hollister. First of all, as far as mixed feelings go, the old joke goes, I have mixed feelings, fear and loathing. Okay. The truth of the matter is, I just want to make some comments on this. I think one reason to open up the recruiting is to find out if that option really even exists. You may find out when you go out recruiting that to get the person you want to run and I'm not taking sides, I'm just saying, you may find out the person with the qualifications you want to run a resource agency is going to cost 3 times what you're willing to pay. You may not have an option there. If you wait to find out, you're going to be in trouble if you ever decide to do it. So I don't see where that's any commitment other than going looking around and saying, is there a highway there if we wanted to take it? For those who say this is going to be difficult finding the right person, I think actually it's going to be easy. We just don't let Joe go. That's always an option, just lock the doors. But I would like to say from my observation of your operation, on my operation, because I'm part of the county, live within the county, you say it's going to be a key person. Well, all your people are key because it's such a small operation. You don't have a lot of pillow space to bounce to. So therefore, all your directors, all your executives, all your key people are really key because we don't have the benefit of having 15 people backing everybody up. This person will be a little more key than if they were 3 different people. So the question is, can you find the right person at this level rather than 3 right people at that level? I don't know. I don't know the answer. Can it work? And will there be disruptions? Well, my experience with organizations are every change is a disruption. I guarantee it, because people do not like change. And so I don't care what you're going to go and do. Somebody's going to say, I don't like it like this new way of doing things. It's just natural human reaction. So I think you ought to start looking to see if you even have that option on the table. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. I'll bring it back to the board for any more.
I have a sticker card for Pat Lowe, but I don't believe she's here.
Oh, okay.
You gave me her time. No.
All right, yeah, no, she's not in the room, so, okay, I'll just bring it back to the board then, and we can move forward. Oh, Supervisor Munzer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have a question for Ray. What is the time frame then for bringing this back to us for the authorizing the reorg or whatever you want to call it?
Well, yeah, I mean, our plan is to look at this from our budgeting perspective as well, and that's one of the reasons why it's on today's agenda, special board meeting with regards to the budget, and to look at that more closely. we would probably align the budgets to be very similar when it comes to the actual revenues and expenditures. You know, the bottom line is, it really is going to depend upon Joe and his date of departure. And so you know, I know that we've been talking, and, you know, there's been some discussions. You know, obviously this wasn't a full-time job for him. So, you know, at this point, you know, probably this fiscal year, the end of this fiscal year would be our goal. To say if it would happen then, I'm not 100% sure, but that would be our goal, is to complete it within our current fiscal year.
So 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, I just still have a question in my mind doing this. We're doing it, we're put somebody in charge that probably will be leaving more shortly, and not be able to get the underlying support in place, in your case, in Public Works auditing.
Yeah.
Maybe in Byron's shop there, another planner that has some experience to deal with some of the complex issues that they're seeing in their department. Or do you do this and merge the department and let the new guy, you know, start filling the holes? I don't know. And what's the chances of getting somebody that does have the qualifications and the knowledge to even look at this county and say, geez, you know, I'm going to have to do all the work? I don't know.
So
I have a reservation.
Right, and understandably so. This is, like Supervisor De La Cruz said, this is a leap of faith, but
Yeah.
the timing could not be more perfect. And remember, we're not making a decision to move in that direction, only to start kind of getting a feel for, will this work for San Benito County? And we have an expert who's done this for a much bigger organization, agency, that I think we can get information a lot sooner than if we would with somebody that wasn't as experienced, so.
And just to be clear, I don't have an exit date that I put. The contract, I think, with my firm is the end of the fiscal year. I've talked with Ray. I actually would like to enjoy the summer a little bit. But that said, I also am very invested in the outcomes, the things that we've collectively have worked on over the last 9 months now, to not just kind of leave it in somebody's lap. So it is one that, you know, I really want to go through and make sure there's a very successful transition, that we go through and solve things that need to be solved and not dump it on someone. It's something I've learned over the years in watching people do kind of this work, is to really set the table so that when, you know, the permanent person comes in, they're able to really go through and take the reins and run, and that they're not having to deal with, you know, Caltrans auditing kinds of stuff, you know, those types of things. I would really want to have those taken care of. And so that is the stuff we're off working on, is trying to solve all of those, get those taken care of. We want to go through and get the job spec, you know, put together and see what's the right kind of description. We want to go through and start working through the budget process and seeing, you know, as Georgia said, running in parallel with the departments and see what those look like if they were to overlap, you know, and come through as a joint department. What would look differently, and are the recommendations we should be working on now to go and start working on staffing? This is the opportune time from a leadership, but it's budget time. So now's the time to go through and think about putting another planner in there, and how do we go through and have the revenues to do that, you know, dealing with some of the accounting things. And it's just fine-tuning the organization. So absolutely, I'm committed to seeing that piece of it through. It's not like, you know, June 30th, I'm planning on bolting out of here, is I really want to go through and, you know, work for what works for the county on that.
And we'll give you 1 month of summer. We can do that. Okay, well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for that information. So I'll bring it back for a decision.
I'll move for staff recommendation.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
And this is, we find that this doesn't work, we could come back and go back what we were doing before. is what I
Absolutely. This is
understand.
not, this doesn't commit us.
This is
Yeah.
Yeah.
just to gather more information.
Yeah.
Right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, yes, we will gather more information. We will be clear and define the organizational chart and define the duties and define the dollar figure. and come to your board. If your board doesn't approve it, then we will remain status quo and we'll move forward with recruiting the respective department heads.
Yeah, and I would hope that you would also bring us the challenges that are being met at that level and what the plan is to address them, so that this way we know that they're solvable and that it's not going to put the county in a situation that will be more difficult than it is now, so.
I guess I'll support it for right now, but I just have some sour taste in my mouth on, just from experience.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, so
Madam Chair?
That's it. Yes.
Would the maker of the motion say Resolution 2015-66, 16.
Okay, so, and one, there is.
Am I
a-
looking at the wrong, I don't see anything about a resolution.
It's for the job classification.
Yeah.
Number
the
one.
Number 2 item
Number two?
is resolution.
Yeah, 2, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, and there is a small change, Georgia, on the, let's see, on the qualification, skill and ability, 5 and 6 kind of run into together, so there should only be a 5 and not a 6 on the skill and ability, okay? So if you could correct that. So
Yes.
so there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, 5-0. Best wishes to our new direction. Yeah.
The board took an action to make that a lifetime appointment? That what I heard?
Well, I promised 1 month of vacation of summer. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, and that's the last item on our special meeting. And you want to introduce it, CAO Espinosa?
Sure, I'll introduce it. Yes, this item is our AB 440. This is a long-standing issue, property tax allocation issue that we've been confronted with. Most people know this as ERAF. And we have Joe Paul Gonzalez, our auditor, controller, elections department head, here to discuss with your board kind of where we're at with that process and where it's at the state level with our Assemblyman Alejo and Senator Canella. So,
Thank you.
Okay, Chair, Board of Supervisors, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about this whole, the purpose of this legislation. And that is a kind of a recap that from the years 1993 to 2002, the county misallocated the property tax factors. And in doing so, the ERAF fund there was a undershift of funds going to the ERAF. And so what happened was that the schools did not get less money from the ERAF. The state underfilled that amount that the schools did not receive. So there was a subsequent audit in 2005, and that audit uncovered these errors. And so the state wants their money. The county's portion of that error is about $2 million. So your board has taken action to reserve those $2 million of ERAF funds in the county general fund in anticipation that we may have to pay that back, even though this is an error that goes back many, many years. So this is AB 440 is a county-sponsored bill that is being carried by our Assemblyman Alejo. This is his second attempt at passing legislative relief for the county on this very issue. The first bill was in the 12-13 fiscal year, was AB 1676. And then when that bill failed to, it failed actually when it went into the Senate Finance Committee. And then the following year, we had Senator Canella carry carry a bill, SB 446, and that also failed in its, at the Senate level. So here we are, hopefully 3 times the charm, and this Assembly Bill 440 would be, will have some success. But there are, our legislative advocate, Matt Seiberling, has been working very, very hard behind the scenes to ensure that, the strategy for legislative relief isn't reliant only on 440. He's working with Alejo's office to help and advocate with the members of the committee, of the actual local governance committee at the assembly level, and he's also advocating behind the scenes with the Department of Finance. What the plan is that the plan is to take AB 440 all the way up through the Assembly and hopefully into the Senate, and go through those 2 committees that would be required before it would, be, passed on to the general, the general Senate, and then possibly taken to the governor's office for a signature. If that fails for the 3rd time, there is an opportunity to fix this ERAF problem, provide us the legislative relief we're seeking through a budget trailer bill. And that's where, that's what would be Alejo's preferred methodology, because it's, has the highest degree of, probability of highest degree of success. So there's two avenues that are being taken right now to ensure that if we're going to get relief, that that there's 2 paths being taken. The next step in the AB 440 path is that there is actually going to be a local governance committee on April 15th, and there is a need for the county to be represented there and to provide testimony to the local governance committee. And I've recommended that the CAO and perhaps one member, at least one member of the board, or possibly 2 members of the board, would attend that committee hearing and provide testimony to let them know how important it is that this bill proceed forward in the path towards, adopting this legislation. So that's really the, kind of the thumbnail sketch of where we're at.
You'd be going to, Joe Paul?
No, I'm not able to attend that hearing,
Okay.
as I have I have a auditors conference that I have to be at, that I've missed last year, and this year I'm told I have to be there.
And Supervisor De La Cruz and I and our CAO were actually at the office of the local government committee just on March the 12th. So they know about San Benito County, they know the challenges, so that may be a good thing, because they already understand where we are as a county financially and what we're looking to do to improve the situation. So, well, that's how I really wanted to spend my birthday, was to be up in Sacramento, and I guess I'll be there. So, yes.
Yeah,
Supervisor Battelle.
I think we all received the letter from RCRC about 2 or 3 weeks back about 440, and attending the meeting a couple weeks ago, they suggested to make sure, don't forget to lobby the Department of Finance. I don't know if it's appropriate to send them a letter or stop in when you're up there, but we really have to try to continue to push them as well. And, speaking with Paul Smith, he felt this 440 had a pretty good chance this go-around.
This go-around.
The state is in a lot better shape than our last effort, and hopefully they'll have a little bit of mercy on us. But I like what I heard, the strategy of, having, if worse comes to worse, the trailer bill, that sounds like a good plan. And I really appreciate our legislators, Assemblyman Aleo and Canelo, continue to work on this.
So I guess, are you volunteering, Supervisor Patello?
Well, it's up to the chair. I feel this is something that, we all have heard time and time again. This money has been out there long before any of us been on the board, and this has to be resolved.
I know that the chair was there at a previous, I think for the 1676 Local Governance Committee. So with our Sheriff Thompson, he gave testimony, and I was there.
And Joe Paul, do you remember that when we went before the Senate Finance Committee, one of the things that they mentioned, and Supervisor Patello, you alluded to that, is that they were in dire straits themselves. The state, we went during the recession, and the state was struggling at that time to figure out how they were going to make their finances and make their budget, get that through their budget. And so I got the impression that at another time, when things are better, we would have a better chance. So, do you remember that?
Yes, I do. I
Paul?
think, I'm very hopeful because I know that just a couple months ago, Assemblyman Alejo was here and presented to the board, gave him kind of a status of what has gone on in the state legislature. He talked about his 7 bills or 8 bills that he authored, and he had 6 of the 7, I believe, signed by the governor. That's a very, very impressive record. So I'm hopeful that Alejo's success record will be, will carry through in this legislation as well.
Okay, well, I'll take a volunteer to go up with us, with me and the CEO. Anybody available on that date?
Well, I would, if it's all right. It's okay.
You're okay? All of you? Okay.
Absolutely.
So Supervisor Patello and I have volunteered, and I will expect a birthday lunch that day.
You got it.
Okay? I'm kidding.
I saved money from the last lunch I was at.
That's right. Maybe we
And
should,
then,
maybe we
you
should
could take her out to
counsel.
lunch, Anthony. It'll be on
Okay,
Margie.
Joe Paul, we have representatives, so
Well,
we
that's
have
great.
made a commitment.
I know that the Assemblyman's office is very, is always very pleased to see members of the Board of Supervisors attend these hearings, because it shows the real commitment behind, the sponsorship of the bill.
Yeah, and he's right, it does show a commitment. Thank you, Joe Paul.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz? Okay, very good. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
And I think about it all the time. I remember.
Yeah, I do that. Okay. And then I keep a copy and I have to send this to Doris, so.